Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Steven Hodgson, and I'm the head of publishing at AMEB. I'm very happy to be here today to launch the brand new AMEB Trombone and Euphonium Series 2 publications, including grade books from preliminary to grade 4 and a new sight reading book. This is in addition to the new Certificate of Performance for trombone, bass trombone, and euphonium. To launch these, I'll be joined by Principal Consultant for the project, Brendan Collins. During this online launch, Brendan and I will talk a little bit about the new publications and the new Certificate of Performance examination. We'll then have the privilege of hearing a few wonderful performances of some of the new works in the gradebooks. Brendan will tell you more about these when we get to it. If you do have any questions throughout the course of the launch, please feel free to type them into the chat at the bottom of the Zoom window, and we'll do our very best to answer them at the end if time permits. As many of you know, the previous series of AMEB Trombone and Euphonium gradebooks were released in 2004. So we're really quite excited to be releasing the Series 2 publications, which are full of a few favorite works, some new arrangements of favorite Baroque, classical, and romantic repertoire, as well as a considerable amount of very new material by composers around Australia. These publications will simply be added to the existing syllabuses. No previous series of books will be withdrawn. The Trombone and Euphonium Series 2 publications and the new Certificate of Performance are the result of a staggering amount of careful and thoughtful work from Brendan, of course, but also from an advisory panel of specialist teachers who have been over every detail of both the new publications and the proposed Certificate of Performance manual lists with a fine-tooth comb, providing expert advice on the suitability of every work proposed. We'd particularly like to thank Elijah Cornish, Matthew Van Emmerich, Greg Aitken, and Fletcher Mitchell for their work and advice on the new releases. Fletcher Mitchell led the development of the Euphonium Certificate of Performance manual lists, and for that we're especially thankful. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our Principal Consultant, Brendan Collins, although for many of you, Brendan will need no introduction. Brendan Collins is currently the Chief Brass Examiner for AMEB New South Wales and the Composer in Residence at Barker College, Sydney. His compositions are frequently performed and recorded throughout the world by many leading international artists, and his music is broadcast regularly on ABC Classic FM. He studied trombone and composition at the Sydney Conservatorium with Ron Prussing, Arthur Hubbard, and George Goller, and later won a scholarship to study in Los Angeles with Ralph Sauer, principal trombone of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. After 11 years as the Associate Principal Trombone with Opera Australia, Brendan was appointed to the position of Composer in Residence at Barker College in 2005, a position he still holds. In this capacity, he has composed numerous works for a wide range of ensembles, which have become very popular among Australia's finest musicians. Welcome, Brendan. Thank you so much for being here, and of course for your tireless work on this very exciting new release over the last year.
Hi, Stephen. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Our pleasure. We'd like to give everyone a bit of insight into the new releases for trombone and euphonium. There's a few aspects to cover. So let's start with the addition of the brand new Certificate of Performance. This is added to the trombone, bass trombone, and euphonium syllabuses for the very first time. What can you tell us about the new Certificate of Performance exam?
Well, look, I think it's probably fair to say most brass players don't have much experience with the Certificate of Performance. That's hard to say, the Certificate of Performance, because we've only had the trumpet syllabus open for 2 years. And now we're just introducing euphonium, trombone, bass trombone. So just to give you a little bit of a framework about how the exam works, it's a recital exam. It's not like your regular grade exam, so candidates come in and present a series of works in a recital format. The time limit is 25 to 35 minutes long, so it's relatively short. And the grade, where we like to think that the grade sits, is somewhere between 8th grade and AMES A. It's that transition into the diplomas that I find Certificate of Performance to be really useful for. I'm delighted that we're actually including the bass trombone this time, because prior to this time, there was no diploma option for bass trombone. Maybe this is the first step. It certainly gives our bass trombone candidates the opportunity to present a recital at the end of the grade process. So I'm delighted, particularly for the bass trombones, but it's great that we're introducing it for all the low brass.
We certainly hope that it's going to be very useful for teachers and students. And we, as you said, we really see it as a bridging level between grade 8 and the recital programs of AMAS and LMAS, but also as a capping level for level 2 for people who might not be going on with their study to the AMAS and LMAS level.
Exactly.
So it has been in other syllabuses for a little bit of time, the certificate level, and joins the trombone, bass trombone and euphonium syllabuses for the very first time in 2022. In searching for repertoire for this new level, what were the considerations? What made a piece work for the certificate of performance?
Oh, look, I had 3 considerations. The first one was obviously the level of difficulty. It needs to sit between 8th grade and AMSA. So no point in putting something in too easy or too hard. I wanted everything to be accessible to players at that level. So picking the right level of difficulty was a real option that I wanted to consider. Also, the length of the piece. This was interesting. I sort of came across this a little bit into the process, because 25 to 35 minutes is a relatively short space of time. And I wanted candidates to have the opportunity to present a balanced program. So if we kept the pieces short, I thought that we could get maybe 4 or 5 pieces in there. I don't really want to have a situation where we can only present 2 pieces in that time limit. So when we included a concerto or a sonata or a major work like that, we usually suggest that only 1 movement, possibly 2 movements, are presented. So the actual length of the compositions was really important. And finally, I mean, this is the major one. The pieces have to appeal to candidates. There's no point in mentioning a piece in a syllabus that no one's going to play. So if every piece has musical value, I thought then we had a really good chance of presenting a syllabus where every candidate had a real range of repertoire that they could choose from. So they were the three areas where I thought that's going to get us the best result in putting the syllabus together.
Thanks, Brendan. Is there anything in particular that you're particularly excited about featuring on an AMEB syllabus for the first time? Any standout pieces?
Oh, look, the repertoire. Look, there's great repertoire. The one that immediately jumps to mind is Eric Gross's Bagatelle. I remember when Eric wrote this piece, he sent me the music. I was a student at the time, and I did the first recording of it. I think they still use it at the Australian Music Centre. So I've got a real connection with that piece. It's a really great, exciting piece. It's an Australian work, so that's equally, well, that's exciting in itself. But the piece itself is really, really good. If we're looking for an historic work, you can't really go past Mercadante's Salve Maria. It's one of the most beautiful pieces I've ever played. And Stephen, you might be interested in this one. It was originally written for the cello.
Oh.
but we trombonists, we stole it from you, and it works beautifully for the trombone. So Mercadante's Salve Maria is a good one. Look, there's an exciting composer I discovered along the way. Her name is Carolina Calvash. Believe it or not, she's a Colombian jazz pianist, but she has a real bent for writing trombone pieces. I don't know why, but 3 of them are fantastic. So I just included all 3 of those in the syllabus. Candidates can choose which one that they like, but they should definitely look out for Carolina's work because they're fantastic. And then there's an exciting English one, Gareth Wood's Dance Sequence. Most people will know that, but give it a go. It's never been in a syllabus before, so it's definitely worth looking at. And I also wanted to make this accessible not just to the budding orchestral trombonist, but also to trombonists in theatre music, in commercial music, in jazz music. So we've included some of J.J. Johnson's jazz etudes in the program so that we can incorporate all musical styles in this terrific syllabus.
That sounds like some really exciting options.
Yeah.
So the new certificate of performance level is included in the new syllabus that's already available online, and the hard copy manual of syllabuses is also available at music retailers and online. So next up, we'll talk a little bit about the new sight reading book. You were actually the composer commissioned to write the new sight reading for the trumpet syllabus a few years ago. And so it's wonderful to be able to feature your work again for the trombone and euphonium sight reading book. What can you tell us about the new sight reading for trombone and euphonium?
Oh, look, I think this book's going to be a great resource for just preparing students for the sight reading component of exams, but more than that, really developing a good understanding of sight reading and some really good skills in your students, or if you're entering yourself, if you're a candidate yourself. The thing I like most about the book is it's graded equally to the grading of the exam. So if you're preparing for 5th grade, we have a progressive series of exercises that are going to prepare you really well for that sight reading component of that particular grade. And it's important that we made every exercise, the series, graded so that students could develop those skills as they went through. I'm actually going to get my students to get this book after about 6 months of studying the trombone, because I think it's such an essential skill for the trombonist to be able to sight read. I'm just going to introduce that into a daily, a weekly part of their routine, just so that they get used to sight reading right from the very beginning. We'll give them 6 months to learn a little bit about the instrument, but then I'm just going to get them straight onto that book, because I think it's really good that we have a graded system that develops those skills in young players.
And even though we don't have preliminary sight reading requirements for the examinations, we've included preliminary examples in the book for exactly that reason, so that students can get started with learning sight reading skills from the very, very beginning. And they're very, very simple, approachable exercises that shouldn't stress anybody out who is new to the instrument. Is there anything new about the sight reading that compared to the old syllabus?
What we're looking at is, we're including clef studies, and you just talked about stressing people out. There's nothing that stresses candidates out more than learning a new clef. I don't get it, but there is a big jump between 4th and 5th grade. 4th grade, it was all bass clef. Everything prior to 4th grade is bass clef. Suddenly candidates finish 4th grade, start working on 5th grade, and we say, oh, by the way, here's a new clef that you have to learn. It's a real shock to them. So we've got a graded system again, helping people to understand the tenor clef. We're not just assessing them anymore, we're helping them to progress up to that point where they will present what they can do in an exam. And again, I'm going to get my students doing this a little bit earlier. I'm going to get my 4th grade students to be really starting to work on the tenor clef easier studies, so that they've got an understanding of the clef and they're not going to be completely railwadded when they get to that 5th grade point where suddenly we say, oh, by the way, here's your new clef. There's a nice gradual lead into it, and to be honest, I haven't been able to find a resource that could do that. So I'm thrilled that the AMEB's managed to put one together.
Oh, that's super. So obviously, clef studies or clef reading exercises are now separate to the sight reading exercise. So they're a separate little section within the book for trombone, and they appear to at the stage at which trombonists should be preparing for clef reading. But as opposed to the previous sight reading where that just happened within a sight reading exercise, these are specific clef reading exercises within the book to help with that preparation. So it sounds like a really wonderful resource for teachers and students preparing for AMEB comprehensive examinations, but also just for drilling that skill and really interrogating where the gaps might be in a student's sight reading skills, so that they can be addressed, and teachers can really look at different issues in a student's training.
Stephen, my feeling about sight reading is the earlier you get students started, the better they're going to be, and it's such an essential skill. I think let's get the students started really early on these books, and I think they'll be very, very useful.
Great. So this is the Trombone and Euphonium sight reading book, which goes all the way from preliminary through to grade 8, which is being released with the Series 2 publications. So without further delay, let's talk about what I hope everyone is waiting for, which is the new Series 2 grade books. Now we have to emphasize that these are additional resources being added to the trombone syllabus and the euphonium syllabus. We released the new technical work last year, and of course that remains current. So don't panic, we're not changing all of the syllabuses once again, just simply adding this set of books as an additional resource. Before going any further, I'd like to thank Alex Garsden from the AMEB publishing team, who did the detailed editing work for this set of publications. So thank you, Alex. Series 2 is a set of grade books for trombone and euphonium. Both instruments use the same books, and they run from preliminary to grade 4. A series like this, of course, is a major undertaking. The content is painstakingly selected by the consultant and review panel, then lovingly edited in a process which takes many hundreds of hours from a large team of contributors, including the consultants themselves, thank you, Brendan, the reviewers, the typesetter, editors, proofreaders, and proof players. So tell us a little bit about how works were selected for the grade books. What sort of things were you looking for in the pieces that were selected?
Well, look, actually, before I answer that question, I too would just like to give my thanks to Alex Garsden for all the work that he's done. It's been terrific working with him. And actually, Stephen, working with you too, I know you've spent countless hours putting these books together as well. So I've been really excited to be part of the team, and working with the two of you has been just wonderful. I've loved the attention to detail that you've taken, and now I know what it takes to actually get a book ready to go to print. So well done to both of you, and I've loved being part of the process. Now, when we talk about the books themselves, I'm so excited that we're about to present these books to trombone teachers and euphonium teachers across the country, because the content is just so fantastic. We've got pieces that cover several centuries, and we've got pieces from all over the world. But unapologetically, I was always looking for really good quality Australian compositions that would fit very comfortably into these pieces. I didn't pick pieces because they were Australian. I picked Australian pieces because I thought they were just so terrific. We've got some fantastic composers that have written for us. Emma Greenhill is a young, emerging Australian composer who's written 3 beautiful pieces for us. We've also got some established composers like Paul TERRACINI. He's written, I think, maybe 4. Once they got on a roll, we kept them going because we knew that they had what it took to produce a really quality piece for the grades. Anybody who's had any experience with the Australian band world will know that Jodie Blackshaw is a really big name. She's written a 4th grade piece for us, which is terrific. And also Jane Thorpe, a well-known arranger, composer, she's written pieces for us as well. So I think there's just so many pieces in there that we can choose from. Probably the biggest dilemma will be, once you buy a book, how are you going to narrow it down to the 3 pieces that you're going to present for an exam? I think most candidates will want to play 7 or 8 pieces from the books. But look, while we're still talking about composers, one of the composers that I didn't know of at the beginning of the process, but I've become very familiar with his work, is Ed Fairley, a Melbourne-based composer. We'll be hearing one of his pieces in a couple of minutes, actually. Beautifully accessible pieces and full of pedagogical value, which were the 2 criteria that I was looking for. And halfway through the process, when I was looking for good quality list A's, I was thinking, you know what, there are so many excellent Australian trombonists who also compose music. So why not approach them to write some of the technical materials? So we've got works by Ron Prussing, who's the principal trombonist of the Sydney Symphony. We've got a list A piece by Brett Kelly. I think it's a 4th grade list A piece. And he was a long-serving principal trombone of the Melbourne Symphony. 2 pieces to really look out for. As soon as you get the books, look out for Josh Davis. He's the principal trombone of the Western Australia Symphony Orchestra, but he's written 2 List C pieces. So they're accompanied works and absolutely first class. I think if we're talking a little bit about appeal earlier on, Josh has nailed it. I think his pieces are going to be very appealing to young candidates, so look out for those ones. And we also didn't neglect the jazz players as well. So when it was List A time to work on techniques, I know in the lovely yellow and blue books that we've already got, there's some great Kieran Bailey pieces, the jazzy pieces, but there was nothing that really focused on jazz techniques in the List A's. So this time I thought we'd correct that. So we've got Mark Barnsley, who is one of Sydney's leading jazz trombonists. He's written a List A study for first grade and a List A study for second grade, which are dealing with jazz techniques, swing rhythms, Latin rhythms, really, really exciting pieces. In fact, we've got Mark playing one of these pieces for you in just a moment. And also we've got Ed Wilson. Now, anybody involved in the Australian jazz scene will know that name immediately. Ed Wilson is a great jazz trombone player, part of the Daley Wilson Big Band, and he's written List A works for 3rd and 4th grade. So we're so well covered for repertoire and technical repertoire. I think, you know, I'm super proud of what we've achieved with putting this content together. But like I said, maybe the dilemma will be, how do we narrow our performances down to 3 pieces for the exam? Because I think there's several pieces there that in every book that students are just going to gravitate to and want to play.
That's really exciting. And of course, underpinning all of these repertoire selections and something that we refer to all of the time is the new technical work that was released last year. So the books, the grade books very much marry up with the technical work. I know we worked very hard to make sure that, that the two supported each other. Now, supporting this series, there will be a set of recorded accompaniments, which runs from preliminary through to grade 3. Now, these recorded accompaniments can be used both for practice and in examination. Beyond grade 3, an accompanist is required for AMEB examinations, COVID arrangements aside, and so AMEB does not produce recorded accompaniments beyond this levels. So we'd like to give everybody a bit of a sneak peek of the contents of this new series. And so we have a few performances by some really excellent students, accompanied by Brendan himself, as well as one performance by a composer, by the composer of the work. Brendan will introduce each work and tell you a little about why it was selected.
Okay, the first piece we're about to hear is called Good Night. It's written by Sydney-based composer Paul TERRACINI, and it's in the 2nd grade book under List C. So it's a piano accompanied piece. And performing it today will be Jake Odam. Now, Jake Odam is a fantastically gifted young player. He just got an A in 6th grade, so playing a 2nd grade piece for him was no trouble at all. I think you're really going to enjoy Good Night by Paul TERRACINI. How nice is that? Such a lyrical
Let's
piece.
see.
Lots of appeal, and also there's some real pedagogical value in that piece as well. Just being able to continue the sound so beautifully. We're going to move on to a List A piece now from second grade. Believe it or not, Mark was a student of mine as well, but he's gone on to do some fantastic things. He's a leading jazz trombone player in Australia. I don't know why he decided on the title for this piece, but he's called it Chili the Rat. I guess we'll have to ask Mark about that at some other point. Look out for it. It is a List A second grade piece. And here it is, played by Mark Barnsley himself. Beautiful. And it brings us on to the final performance of today. This is a piece by Ed Fairley, a new composer to me. I hadn't known his work before the whole process, but I've learned some terrific pieces that he's written since becoming involved with him in this process. This is called a little epic. And I love the title because it is quite epic, and it's little as well. So it certainly lives up to its name. It's a third grade List C piece. So if for anybody planning on doing third grade next year, definitely look out for a little epic. We've got Sophie Liu performing this one. Sophie Liu's a Year 6 girl, student of mine, and Sophie got an A+ in 5th grade today. So she was really happy to have to play only a third grade piece for this one. This is a little epic by Ed Fairley.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Brendan. And thanks for those wonderful performances, Jake Odam, Sophie Liu, and Mark Barnsley. Before we go, there's been one question sent through, although there may be some more that come through now via the chat function, which I'll see what we can do to answer. So from the chat window, we have, does the new sight reading book for tenor trombone have different clefs, and is each clef required in the exams? Do you want to cover that, Brendan?
Yeah, I'm very happy to cover that one. The answer is yes. In the exams, we introduce tenor clef at 5th grade, we introduce alto clef at 7th grade, and if you follow through the progress of the book, you'll be completely covered for all the requirements, either for clef reading or for sight reading, for every grade.
Great, thank you so much. And I think that's it in terms of our questions. That concludes our AMEB Trombone and Euphonium new series publications launch. The syllabus is available online and via your local music retailers already. And the new Trombone and Euphonium Series 2 publications can be pre-ordered now. They'll be available in January at your local music shop via ameb.edu.au and via other online sheet music retailers. Thank you once again, Brendan, Principal Consultant for the Trombone and Euphonium project, and to the other consultants and contributors to the syllabus and books, Matthew Van Emmerich, Elijah Cornish, and Fletcher Mitchell, as well as Greg Aitken. In addition to our typesetting and proofreading team and the many Australian and international composers whose works make the grade books so very good. Thanks also to the behind the scenes AMEB team, especially Bernard De Pasquale, AMEB CEO, and Alana Caldwell for making this online launch possible. And last, but certainly not least, to everyone who's attended the launch now and who is listening to it or watching it a little bit later when it gets posted online. We hope that the new Trombone and Euphonium publications and the Certificate of Performance examination serve the trombone and euphonium community as a useful and inspiring resource for years to come. Thank you so much and goodbye.